Chris put some pretty daunting concepts on the table. And I want to talk about how companies are actually getting there, and even more importantly, why some companies are moving so damn slowly to get there. Ultimately, we have to deliver returns for our shareholders. We have got to achieve top-line growth. We've got to achieve bottom-line growth. And the ways we do that as an industry, as Chris is pointing out, have got to fundamentally change. Let me start by asking you a question. How many of you think that the tech industry is a growth industry? Put your hand up if you think the tech industry is a growth industry. Okay, that's interesting. If I had asked you 10 years ago, how many of you thought the tech industry was a growth industry? How many of you would have put your hand up? Everybody, right? TSIA is, by the way, 90%, we did a little lookup, 90% of the companies in this room belong to the TSIA. And what we do is we're a bunch of research nuts, and we're trying to look at the actual facts and the actual data about what your companies and all the other companies that we work with are doing, what practices you are using, and what kind of results you're getting. So we can see, in fact, what's happening to the industry, what's working, and what's not working. And this visibility extends beyond traditional IT, because as you know, software is truly eating the world. So what's happening at Dell and EMC, and what's happening at GE, and what's happening at other companies who 10 or 15 years ago would never have said, I'm a tech company, and now all of a sudden, as software eats the world, this community becomes a bigger, broader community. And what we do is we take that community, we get you to tell us non-public information about your practices and the results you're getting from those practices. We have a bunch of really smart big data folks and industry experts who look at all that, and we try to come back and tell you what's happening, right? And what do you need to do to be able to go directly to what works without the trial and error process that so many companies have to go through. And so we have a lot of very interesting data, benchmarks, frameworks that I'm going to share with you today about this journey from being an asset-focused capital equipment company, which I would submit to you, I don't care whether you're in, if you've been in this industry, whether your company has been alive for more than 10 or 15 years, whether you make a hardware product or a software product, you behave like a capital equipment company. Okay? Capital equipment companies like to make, sell, and ship products, right? When I say that to a lot of software CEOs, they laugh, because for many years, that's what they wanted to do. Now, it's a software product, but really, their economics were optimized when they make, sell, and ship product. So by working together, we figure out how to achieve these objectives. And I'm going to submit to you with some data that there's never been a more important time for us to get powerfully re-engaged in new ways on some of these topics. We have got to figure out how to restore growth to the top lines of our companies. We have got to figure out how to restore margins to many of our offers, because the commoditization is starting to run rampant in industries that nobody would have believed would turn into commodities. We have got to figure out what these new X as a service and outcome-based business models are really going to look like, because I'm telling you, companies are paralyzed because they know how to run the old business and they're not sure how to run the new business, and they're afraid of, we call it the fish in the middle, right? revenues that might go down for a while they learn business, while at the same time expenses go up, right? And they get paralyzed around that. So we've been working with 400 of the biggest tech, industrial equipment, medical device companies in the world, and we've been chronicling this journey in a series of books. This latest book, which you're going to get today, is really hard to read, because it's what everybody asked us for, which is the playbook, right? Don't just tell us what's happening in the industry. Tell us what to do about it, right? How do I change my portfolio management thinking? What does R&D have to do differently? How do I rethink services? How do I do all these things? And that's what this book is about. But today I want to talk to you not only about where the puck is in the industry, but where the puck is going to be. Because I think really at the end of the day, that's the question that you all have to answer. You as a company and you as individuals, right? Where is the puck going to be for your organization, your function, your objectives? Remember when the world was simple and we sold complex products to IT departments, and we loved the complexity. We demoed the complexity, right? We charged to install the complexity. We charged to train the users on the complex products. We charged to maintain the complexity, right? We loved our complexity. We made a ton of money off complexity. And then some very strange things started to happen. Software started eating hardware. And once that happened, and the internet came along, we said, hey, we can stick that software out on the cloud. We can get out of the data center, put it out on the cloud. And once we do that, we can meter the software and sell it as a service. So instead of having the customer pay up front, the customer can pay as they go. And because we can do that, business buyers can make their own independent decisions to sign up for our service instead of dealing with the Department of No, right? The IT organization. So in a very short period of time, we went from selling complex products to IT buyers to all of a sudden having to go sell services to business buyers. What does the head of marketing want to do? What does the head of finance want to do? And our sales teams and our service teams don't know much about those things. You want to get into the customer's outcome, you've got to understand their business, right? This is a new world for us. And at the same time, the complexity is coming out, which makes the customer happy, but the price per unit of technology is going down, 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 down. I mean, commoditization is something every hardware company in the world knows about. Software companies thought they were immune to this. Guess what? It's not, right? I mean, the price per unit of almost every kind of enterprise technology is under price pressure. Nobody likes the word commodities, but that's what a lot of technology has become. And if we do nothing, we're not going to get a great result from that. It's causing business model problems. Companies that have been great companies, financially great, great for shareholders, considered to be innovators, are now having a crisis. And I guarantee you that if your company hasn't already had the crisis, the oh, shoot moment, it's going to be hard to change. It takes, my observation from working with many of your companies, it takes that oh, shoot moment to really get you to change the way you think and start embracing some of these sort of radical new concepts that Chris is putting on the table around the outcome economy. So what's happening? Okay, two mega trends. We just talked about them. Commoditization of feature functionality and the demand of customers to move to new forms of contractual relationships with you where they pay as they go, number one, and number two is the risk shifts to you, right? If they don't like the service, they turn it off. They didn't pay you up front, they're out no money, they use it, they don't like it, they can turn you off. Those two things are forcing companies to rethink their business model and to realize, like the customer success function, that there are entirely new organizational capabilities we simply don't have. Why don't we have them? Because in the old model, we didn't need to. The customer paid us up front, right? We got our money. We put them onto a maintenance contract. We knew we could renew those maintenance contracts at 70, 80, 90, if you're SAP, 100%, right? So whether the customer got this much value out of the product or that much value out of the product was really kind of up to the customer. We didn't need a customer success function. Now, all of a sudden, in this new world, we absolutely need a customer success function. Because if the customer doesn't succeed, it's our revenue problem. It is our margin problem. It's also standing up very disruptive new offers. Look at what AWS is doing to many of the traditional, compute storage functions. And it's enabled by this new capability. I mean, they've got a pricing model where, because they've got all these different pricing plans. And at the end of the month, they look at a particular customer's consumption of their platform, and they run an algorithm that says, based on how much they used of all these things, of all the 17 pricing models we could have available, which one would allow us to send the smallest bill to that customer, and they put them on that plan for the last month. Whoa, whoa. The customer is guaranteed to pay the lowest price every month, and Amazon takes responsibility for figuring out what pricing plan to put them on to make sure that they're getting the lowest price. Different world. And ultimately, it's forcing us to change our offers. And I think that's what Chris is trying to make the point. Where this is all leading is new kinds of offers where we are getting in with the customer and trying to attach to their business outcomes. And that involves so much fundamental change. Fundamental change in our revenue models, fundamental change in our profit models, fundamental change in the break-even situation we have on individual deals. It fundamentally changes which customers we want to take on as partners, as customers, and which ones we don't want to take on. I mean, go tell your salesperson that somebody that has budget, that they should walk away from the deal. Right? I mean, in the past, the definition of a good customer was a customer with budget. Now, all of a sudden, even if they have budget, if they're unprepared to do what they need to be successful on their end, you got to walk away. Because you're going to put a lot of money into that customer, and if they can't execute on their side, they're going to fail, and you're going to fail. So, all these companies, born in the cloud companies, capital equipment companies, industrial equipment companies, high-tech companies, I would submit to you, are in one of these four states. A very small number of companies are still profitable and growing in their legacy business model. And it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller every single quarter. A growing number of companies are in that lower left, where their core business models are facing commoditization. And then there's a whole bunch of born in the cloud companies and companies that are more aggressively moving that are in what we call SaaS 1.0. And the reason why we call it SaaS 1.0 is we don't think it's a sustainable business model. Because those companies are not profitable on a GAAP basis, right? At the end of the day, your companies in their heyday were both growing and profitable. If you look at the majority of If you look at the majority of the born in the cloud companies, they are growing like crazy and they are losing money. How do you think your shareholders would react to that strategy? right? If your CEO said, hey, we're moving to the cloud, moving to the outcome-based economy, got a great idea, it's going to be really powerful, we're going to lose money for 10 years, right? Can't do that. So we don't think these born in the cloud 1.0 models are sustainable. You got to produce a GAAP profit. So we think there's another model, a 2.0 model. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Here's some data that backs it up. We have an index called the Technology and Services 50, 50 of the largest high-tech companies in the world, and includes a huge percentage of the companies in this room. And we look at the combined financial performance of those 50 companies. This is, IBM and HP and Oracle and Microsoft and, all these folks. Those 50 companies are growing at zero. Zero. But they're still making a healthy profit. The industrial equipment companies that we track are actually shrinking by 9%, but they're still making a good profit, which is the bottom index. Now let me swap out the bottom index for the cloud index that we track. Look at the growth rate of the cloud companies. They're growing their top line by 21%. Look at the operating income. Okay? One other thing I want to point out, look at the percentage of their revenue that's coming from their core subscription, 88%. Think about your business model at your company. Okay? I'm going to come back to that in a minute. This shows the combined quarterly revenues of those 50 companies. From the public data, we track their public data, we add it all up, how much revenue do those 50 companies do together? In the fourth quarter of 2008, before the recession, those companies did about $250 billion together. So they were at $1 trillion run rate. Then see the recession, right? Then there was the build-up, back up, and they basically got back to about $1 trillion in the first quarter of 2012. Look at what's happened in the last 4 years. Consistently down, 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 down. Here's the killer. It is a product-led contraction. This separates the product revenue from the service revenue of those 50 companies. The orange line is the product businesses. The blue line is the service and subscription business. It's a product-led contraction. How many of you think your companies would consider themselves to be a product company? Right? Look at what's happening to the product business. Hey, by the way, that blue line, I think everybody in the room has a little high fives to do, because we as a services community have done a pretty good job of being able to defend and protect those service revenues and grow those service revenues. And look at the last quarter. Look at just the last quarter. The lines are separating at a faster rate. So, most companies today commoditize legacy business models, or if you're born in the cloud, potentially a high growth but unprofitable business. So what is profitable X as a service going to look like? Because really what Chris is talking about, when you tie into the customer's outcomes, you're really talking about a service business model, right? I'm going to help you, and as you succeed, you're going to pay me for my services. That's what it is. Whether you call it SaaS or infrastructure as a service or managed services or whatever, it is really about your company as a service to these customers. Okay, again, we know the model is growing. We know everybody who's got that model today has got very, very high top-line growth because customers love it. But we also know they're unprofitable. So in the hardware business, the CapEx hardware business, we knew how to craft a profitable income statement, right? And this is real data, right? These are the average product and service revenue mix and the margins and the gross margin, and then how much we spend on SG&A and how much we spend on R&D. And on average, a traditional enterprise hardware company was making around 15%. We knew a similar formula for enterprise software companies, right? 75% gross margin, a little bit higher SG&A, more R&D, 20%. Industrial equipment, same thing. We knew what the financial models looked like. We knew how to drive a profitable quarterly performance, an annual performance. This is what unprofitable SaaS 1.0 looks like. Remember I showed you that 88% of all the revenue coming from the core subscription, right? They have very undiversified revenue streams. They are getting the vast majority of their revenue from the core offer, and a very, very small amount of generally unprofitable service wrappers that go around them. And they have really high selling expenses, right? Salesforce.com, now basically a $10 billion company spending 56% of revenue on sales and marketing. There are public companies, pure SaaS companies, that are spending over 100% of revenue on sales and marketing. Tough to make a GAAP profit when you're spending over 100% of revenue on sales and marketing. So, what's wrong? I would submit to you there's at least 4 things. One is we don't have agreement on what the profitable end state model is going to look like. We need, as an industry and as individual companies, we need to paint a picture of what we're running to. What is an outcome-based business going to look like financially? What is an as-a-service model going to look like in a way that will be palatable to our shareholders? Second thing is, we have got to realize that these core offers in the cloud are commoditizing so fast. AWS and Azure from Microsoft are in this unbelievable price battle, right? I think AWS has had 47 price reductions in the last 3 years. 47 price reductions in the last 3 years. And if all you do is sell compute and storage, and the price is going to go to virtually free, it's going to be hard to make money. So how do we think differently? How do we defend against that? The third thing is dragging the traditional sales models forward. You know how powerful the sales organization is in your company. You know how expensive that sales model costs. You know the skills and lack of skills of some of your channel partners, right? Those models were right at a particular time. But there are a lot of born-in-the-cloud companies and traditional companies that are pivoting over to X as a service offers that are taking those old models and trying to pull them forward. And that's how you get 117% cost of sales. And then, as Chris pointed out, there is great uncertainty in the boardroom and the executive suite of most of your companies over how we're going to move from the current org structure to the new org structures that everybody's calling for, right? And I think to answer those questions, you have to start at the very beginning. You have to ask yourself 2 questions. What do my customers want me to be today? Forget what I was. What do they really want me to be today? Now, not every customer wants the same thing. There are still customers who want to buy the product, take it off your hands, give it to the IT guys, you know, they'll own and operate. There's still those kinds of customers out there. That's the old sort of RFP-driven business, and that's not probably ever going to go away. But as I just showed you, it's certainly not growing. So the customers where there's growth, they want something different. They want a reliable partner who is going to deliver ongoing business outcomes from complex technology. Ongoing business outcomes. Who's going to make sure that as a customer, I'm getting more financial value from the technology tomorrow than I did yesterday. Now you think about that simple thought, right? How do I know whether this supplier is going to make sure that every day I'm getting more and more and more and more business value, better and better and better outcomes from the technology than I was the day before? I'm getting asked, if I'm the customer, I'm getting asked for better performance by my boss every day. Whoever I'm partnering with, they need to be in the same boat as I am, right? That's what the modern customer wants. They want Rolls-Royce not only to sell power by the hour, but to try to figure out how to optimize the fuel consumptions of those engines while they're in the plane so that they can reduce their fuel costs more next quarter than last quarter. At the same time, what investors want is changing. Investors are learning to value recurring revenue. Two companies with the same revenue, one is capital equipment transaction-oriented revenue, and the other is recurring revenue. Which one's going to have a higher share price? The one with recurring revenue, because it's predictable, right? It's predictable. So this is the new reality. Shareholders who want recurring revenue, customers who want an ongoing relationship to make sure that you're the partner who's going to drive a better business outcome from them tomorrow than yesterday. And by studying all these companies, I can tell you that's a different business. That is a different business than the capital equipment make, sell, ship model, make, sell, ship, maintain model that we all know and love, right? So what's it going to take? As I mentioned, a clear picture of the end financial state. What are we trying to get to? I would submit to you it's going to look more like this. If you remember the other one I just showed you, 90% of the revenue coming from the core subscription, almost nothing coming from services. I think it's going to be a very different model where there's lots of value-added services wrapped around these core subscriptions. Today, the CEOs of many born in the cloud companies, they're like, I don't want that service. I don't want the services. It's not scalable. Get somebody else to do the services, right? That model is not producing profits. In fact, it is also not necessarily going to produce that business result, that outcome, that ongoing relationship that the customers want. Second is, we got to attack this sales cost problem. We have to. Cannot be 50, 60, 70, 80% cost of sales and expect to generate a profit. We have to really think differently about how we land, adopt, expand, and renew these relationships. So you think about these three things. A different revenue mix than the current model for most of these as-a-service companies. Service businesses that are actually profitable, service business that wrap around whatever the technology is. I mean, think about your business model today if you pooled out the profitability of the maintenance and support business, right? Aren't we pretty happy that we built a maintenance and support business around our product? Imagine if we had taken this attitude of, I don't want to do services, right? And then the third thing is the sales cost. So how do we get that financial model? We think that's possible. If you look at AWS today, they're pretty close to that. They are pretty close to that model. We have to learn to diversify the portfolio. And to do that, we have to think about taking customers on a journey. And in this new book, we talk about three kinds of companies or three stages that your new outcome-based as-a-service offers will go through. In the beginning, you just want to get customers on the platform, right? And that's when you just sell the core subscription and you make it really easy and say, hey, we'll do a pilot with you. And then, once the pilot's successful, blah, blah, you make it really easy. You reduce the friction to get a new customer to try out your as-a-service offer. But if you never, ever, ever do anything else, I guarantee you will have a commoditized, unprofitable relationship. You got to take the customers and the offers on a journey. Get them on the platform, put them in the pot, start to turn up the heat a little bit. Hey, we have some other services we'd like to come back to you with, right? Because we actually need to convert all of these paying customers to a profit. So we need to hit this, we call it the wedge, where all of a sudden the revenue from these customers pass the cost of serving them. And ultimately, we have to get to the thinking, again, that we have now, which is how do we optimize the profitability? Not just the revenue, but the profitability. And we've got to do that by thinking differently about our portfolio and pricing, our financial models, and our customer engagement models, which I want to talk briefly about those things. The economic engines of technology companies today are made up of 5 things. You can sell a product. You can sell a subscription to a technology. You can wrap an annuity service around it, like support and maintenance or customer success. You can have project services like PS, or you can make money off transactions, right? So some of the examples that Chris gave of some of these other companies, they're monetizing transactions. Most of these SaaS companies that you see today look like I showed you, very much on the left. 90% of the revenue coming from the core offer, very little else. And the else is massively unprofitable, typically. Giving away implementation projects at a loss to get the customer on the platform, that kind of stuff. We think there's a journey, whoops, go back one, please. We think there's a journey in the revenue stream, right? So that means a couple things. That means we have to have portfolios of services that fit into more of these categories. We have to embrace project services. We have to attach to transactions. We have to do many, many things. And it's going to mean there are more things to renew. It's not just renewing the core subscription anymore. It's renewing the core subscription and a whole host of additional services. So there is a potential for further employment for everybody in this room. But you think about taking customers on these portfolio journeys in these as-a-service models. First, it's like, please try our new as-a-service. Please try it. We'll make it really easy for you to try it. Get them on, and then we have to take them on this journey where we're starting to charge, create more services, charge for those services, attach to their business outcomes. And I'm going to give you some examples of companies that are really doing that. The good news is there are a million opportunities to do this. I mean, if you look at all of these new optimized and outcome-based service capabilities that now that we can connect to our products, connect to our users, we can do. There's tons of things to monetize, tons of things. But you got to think about it like that. You got to get the company to think about what is the replacement for the traditional support and maintenance revenue stream. Right? What new value props are we going to have in an annuity attachable set of services that are valuable to the customer in the new world, the outcome-driven world? So we, as an example, have a 10-layer value prop that you can take your existing support business and evolve. So we're all offering this today, you know, we're offering foundational reactive support and proactive support, right? But what's next? So now all of a sudden we say, boy, I'm a little worried about being able to defend and protect that value prop. But if I can step over the line into operational services, I can begin to do new things for customers. I can support adjacent technology. I can augment their staff. I can monitor the technology and optimize its performance remotely. I can take on risk management and compliance. And then you get into this whole area of adoption, right? We can help take over the responsibility for making sure the customer is using the high-value parts of the product. And we can monetize these things. And we have to monetize them because the core offer is going to compress and compress and compress. Our data says that among the pace-setter companies, they're now monetizing. They have 31% of their customers who are paying for the customer success function. And the top companies, small companies, because we take out the outliers, almost half their customers are paying for customer success. Now, in the past, nobody paid for customer success. It was included with the product, right? And now everybody is starting to tease that back out of the core offer and say, no, 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 no. Customer success is a monetizable function, right? It is an annuity service. It has value, and we're going to charge you for that value. So we're learning what good looks like. We're learning that we have to evolve the portfolio. The other thing we know, you know, is the old sales models have got to be changed. And we are fond of saying the following. Growing annual recurring revenue is a process, not a heroic act. Now, if you think about the legacy of the field sales organizations, they're all about heroic acts, right? Slaying the big dragon, getting the big deal, the diving catch on the renewal, whatever it is, the heroic acts. This is a different world. This is about systematically, day in and day out, building the value to the customer in a way that increases the amount of money that they spend with you, and making things like the renewal a non-event. That's the goal. The renewal is not a transaction, it is a non-event, because 364 days of activity before that lock that customer into the value. The renewal's a non-event. We know what this model looks like. We know you have to have a waterfall model, right? And you guys know, yeah, what I'm talking about on the waterfall model, right? You have, well, you know. That's hard. You can have churn, that takes away from your base. You can have downsell because things are commoditizing, and if the customer's not buying, if they're buying the same amount from you this year that they did last year, they're going to want to pay less. So you have customers who come off the platform, you have customers that downsell. In order to make up for that, you have to have upsell, you have to have cross-sell, and hopefully at the end of all that, you renew that base of customers, that base of contracts at more money next year than last year. That is a, whoa, heroic acts don't scale in that model, right? But we know what it looks like, right? We know that this model, what I would say the traditional full service model, where there's a customer gets handed off 1 million times, right? R&D builds a product, marketing sells it, they take a lead, they have it to the sales force gets the deal, they handle it to finance processes the order, they hand it to the PS and implementation guys who implement it, they hand the deal to the education guys, then they hand it to the customer who operates it, and then we support them, and then you guys come along and renew. A bucket brigade. We know how to run that play. We know who does what. We know how to organize that function, and we know it's a phenomenally expensive model, particularly when the revenue from that model is coming in small, monthly, pieces, right? Not a ton of money up front, but the OpEx model. We have got to learn to deliver different revenue streams at different sales costs. It's still going to be expensive to land a new customer. This is industry average data that says if you look at the total first year revenue of a new customer in these as-a-service models, it's going to cost you $1.07 of sales and marketing costs for every $1 revenue. Okay? This is why they have these huge sales and marketing costs, because it's costing them more than the first year revenue just to get the deal. Okay? But if your expand and renew costs also look like that, because you're using the field to do all the expansion and all the renewal, you're dead. What you need is expansion and renewal sales costs that are a fraction of that. A fraction of that, right? And this is what you see. 18 cents on the dollar of revenue, 12 cents on the dollar of revenue. And I would submit to you that even finally, the land motion, the way we're landing new customers, is about to change. I'm not going to get into that. It is going to change. But we know how to do this. We know how to systematically grow customer spending. We're going to have different actors, not just the account executive who owns it. We're going to have new actors on the team. And those actors are going to be taking actions every single day to help advance the value of the technology to the customer. And then we're going to look at the data and we're going to say, did that action improve anything? And if it didn't, our analytics are going to go into the tools that our customer success managers and renewal specialists and whatever they used and say, take a different action. And then we're going to look at the data, right? And this play is going to be run thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times a year for your larger customers. Not just coming in every so often, but really running this play every day. You know, we call it layer at TSIA, land, adopt, expand, renew. We have models for how to do this. We know what it looks like. We have the slideware. Yes. But again, you can't go to a customer and say, I'm going to land you, I'm going to expand you. You got to talk to them in a language that's meaningful to them, and we even know what that is. We say, hey, we're going to plan, implement, monitor, and optimize your outcomes. That's the conversation the modern customer wants to have. I got two vendors here. Their products are pretty commoditized, to be honest with you, right? One of them is going to be my partner. How do I decide which one? I can tell you definitively from talking to everybody from Salesforce.com, you name it, will tell you more and more companies are making their decision on who to partner with based on that conversation rather than the demo. Right? They want to know that you have a plan to help plan, implement, monitor, and optimize their business outcomes. That's why you're getting solution architects and technical specialists but pulled up into pre-sales. Why customer success managers getting pulled into pre-sales? Because the customer's like, I don't even need to see a demo. I know what your product does, right? I talked to 1 million people who are already using the product. I know what it does. What I want to know is what journey am I going to go on? Me as a customer and all of my people. What's the journey that we're going to go on? Prove to me you're the best partner and you got the deal. Speaking of partners, 30% of the partners, I don't know where that came from. 30% of the partners got to go. They got to go. They make money off selling points and doing implementation projects, right? They resold your product, they made money there, and they did technical implementations. That value prop, there's still going to be some customers there, but they got to learn to play in this new world, right? I spoke at the Microsoft Partner Conference in Toronto a couple months ago, and here's Microsoft is managed services, managed services, managed services, managed services. I mean, Microsoft, the ultimate make, sell, ship software company for so long, is now managed services, managed services, managed services. And the partners have got to step up to that. We need partners that can add value in new ways. And only a percentage of them are going to make that journey. We think we know what it looks like, but lots of them are dragging their feet. So, last thing. Outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. What is an outcome? What does that mean? I had a CEO of one of the companies in this room who I happen to know personally when B for B came out and consumption economics came out, 6 or 7 years ago, this company really attached on the word outcomes because we started talking about outcomes. And we're literally having a drink one night, and he goes, outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. He said, you had everybody in our company using this word. We have no idea what we're talking about. We're telling customers we care about their outcome. We're talking internally about outcomes. We have no idea what we're talking about, right? The bottom line is this. Selling gear is a declining business. Commoditizing, declining, whatever. We got to help get customers to put new money on the table. New money on the table. IT budgets are shrinking. We got to help them put new money on the table. We get them to put new money on the table because we can help them make more money. If we help them make more money, we can charge more money. It's a really radical concept, right? New customer value. New net customer value. That's why we're using this word outcomes. Because if we can create more value for the customers and we can attach to that value, we will get paid. And we will get paid more as we deliver more value, right? It's the way we're going to restore growth to the tech industry. This is a great quote from GE. And GE is so fascinating because they were the ultimate sort of, manufacturing company. And as you've probably read, they are just radically shifting their business model, right? So he says, we have to treat our service agreements to share outcomes with our customers in the same way that an IT company might approach that in the future. So they actually see our industry making this pivot to outcomes, and they want to be in, right? In order to do that, we have to add technology, we have to have people, we have to change our business model, we have to be willing to do all those things. They had their oh shoot moment, and they're willing to make those changes. So what are outcomes? We think about outcomes at TSIA in 3 buckets. The first bucket is consumption. Can you monitor and tell me how much of your solution we are consuming? Are we consuming the stuff that is important to us? And if we're not, can you help us get better? So you can talk to customers about an outcome based on consumption. Power by the hour is a consumption-based outcome, right? If you don't use, you don't pay. That's the simplest one. And if you've got a cloud offer or you've got good connectivity to your product, you can probably have an offer that does that today. I was just down at an oil and gas company last week, actually another division of GE, and they sell very old school stuff. And we started talking about a new offer, which is basically charge for flow, right? If there's nothing, because there's a lot of idle capacity in the oil and gas business right now, right? And customers don't want to be buying equipment if they're not going to use it. So pay for flow. If there's gas and oil flowing through the pipes, you pay these guys. If there's not, you don't pay, right? Second is KPIs. Can you identify a customer KPI that's meaningful to them that you can move? You with me on that? Is there a business metric that's important to this customer or this industry that we can move? Most importantly, this is really important, you got to be able to measure that KPI. Here's lessons from the field. If you rely on the customer for data to tell you how well you're doing, you're in trouble. You have got to identify the KPI that's meaningful. You have to make sure you are the one who's tracking it, right? Then you can begin to charge based on the movement of that KPI. And then the most important thing is financials. Can you attach to the financial performance of that company? So when you think about this as a progression, good would say, I'm going to have an outcome offer based on how much you use, pay as you go. Better would be, I can not only drive adoption, but I can actually monitor an important KPI for your business, and I'm going to only charge you based on the improvement in that KPI. And the best is to say, I'm going to align to your financial outcomes. You make more money, I make more money. If you can't do those things, you should not have that offer in the field. If you cannot count the KPI, if you cannot prove the financial performance in your product, you should not have that offer. But what's also interesting is who you're selling to. If you go to the IT department, you can talk about consumption, right? That's important to them. But if you're going to go to the business buyer wants to talk about the KPIs that are important. What does the marketing executive care about? What does the compliance department care about? What do they care about? And if you're going to try to get to the C-suite, you better be ready to talk about financial performance, right? So really, this is a journey, and the journey is very different in the markets you serve. When we think about outcomes, we got to be able to go and talk to these companies about the outcomes that are meaningful in their industry. Retail cares about same-store sales. Hotels care about occupancy rates. Banks care about products per customer, right? We've got to learn how our products drive those business outcomes. And we've got to help the sales organizations tell the story, right? This is the outcome that's important in retail, right? Here's the specific business outcome. These are the financial impacts to a retailer from advancing these outcomes. These are the KPIs that they use to determine whether those outcomes are happening or not. This is how our technology and our services are going to drive those improved results. And here's our plan, implement, monitor, and optimize strategy to execute on that. That is the sales conversation the modern buyer wants to have, starting at the top. Do you understand my business enough to put your finger on a business outcome that's meaningful to me? And then everything else. Prove to me you understand the financial impact. Prove to me you know what metrics I use to run my business. Prove to me you understand my processes. Prove to me those things. It's got to be revenue. It's got to be cost reduction. It's got to be risk avoidance. At the end of the day, the outcomes have got to do one of those three things. And I think what we're learning is walking in the door and telling the story at the technology level. Let me tell you about our product. Let me tell you about the features. That's the commoditizing part of the business. Understanding the outcomes, the financial results, and the operating KPIs. These are the enabling conversations that people want to have. I'm going to jump way ahead here. This is a way different way of running a company, a way different set of offers, a way different set of capabilities than the models that most of us grew up with, right? And again, back to what Jeff Immelt at GE says, he says, we made a decision that we just want to be all in. We made a decision we just want to be all in. And I would submit to you, most of the hundreds of companies that we work with every day, including many of yours in our view, are just not moving fast enough. And you can see that by the lack of growth on the top line of many of these businesses. And why? Why? It's not that they don't know. It's they have very difficult questions. They are struggling with how to organize in this new world, right? I know I can trust my head of sales with 90% of the revenue of the company. I can trust that guy. But now you're telling me that my customer success and my renewals team in a subscription-based model, that they're going to own 90% of the revenue. Geez, do I trust that guy or that woman? Do I trust those people to own that much of the number, right? They're struggling with these organizational issues. They're struggling with the funding and revenue attribution. Who pays for customer success? Is customer success a cost of sales? Is it cost of goods? Right? What is it? They're struggling with that. Great debate, right? How do we fund customer success? And lastly, services. Services are becoming what the customer wants to talk about in pre-sales. All of a sudden, we're pooling the services people that were always considered to be sort of downstream actors. All of a sudden, they're moving to the front of the conversation. It makes everybody nervous, right? It makes sales nervous. Can I put that person in front of the customer or not, right? Who's gonna own those resources? If they're now up in pre-sales, is that sales? Or are they still in services, but they're acting in a pre-sales environment, right? It's all of these internal issues. We have recently taken a stand on these. There's a video of the most recent keynote that we did at the TSIA conference about 3 weeks ago, where we actually put our thoughts on the table. We said, here's how we think these things should be answered. You're welcome to go look at that. But I just got to say, I don't think we're moving fast enough. And I think the fact that we're not moving fast enough is creating opportunities for disruptive competitors to come into your markets and take away customers. So the words, the outcome economy, the words are the right words. The journey to building that business is a hair-raising, unnerving, difficult journey. And you know what? There's no option. Otherwise, our businesses will go like this and like this and like this and like this. Wasn't that upbeat and positive? Well, listen, I want to thank you guys very much. I have time for 1 or 2 questions before I explode here. Any question? Anybody disagree? Or yeah. I can repeat the question. Yeah.
Thank you. That was awesome. My question is, companies who are kind of used to selling hardware and then maintenance services on it, how do they do pricing transition on the consumption-based model? How do you come up with pricing?
Yeah.
Is there a framework? Do you guys have a framework you published?
Yeah, it's actually in this book. There's a whole section on
Okay.
pricing. But this is the whole thing, is that if you can attach to value, so how do you get margin back into the conversation? You get margin back into the conversation by attaching to the customer's value and saying, look, you just made $100 off of something that we did. You just made $100. I just want 40, right? Or I just want 60, right? Instead of saying, well, wait a minute, what is your cost of making this, cloud-based thing work? So you really, to reestablish margin in the business, you've got to think about pricing not being cost plus or cost base anymore, but what is the business value you're delivering to the customer, and how do you sit down and have a conversation that's anchored on that, not anchored on the cost, right? That's how you get Azure and AWS going into nowhere. But the second thing is the subscription is going to be highly competitive. Whatever the core offer is, the prices are going to be widely known and highly competitive. But because we know we're going to take that customer on a journey and we're going to start wrapping other services and products around that, you're going to have where there's more of a captive market because the customer's already using the core subscription. Then you can really have this conversation about what's the incremental value, our premium customer success offer, which is going to drive your KPIs from here to there. What's the economic value to that? Let's talk about what I'm going to charge you for that. When I was just speaking to the cloud sales force of one of the big cloud infrastructure companies, and they were telling the people in the room, we don't make any money on the core offer. It's these advanced workloads. You got to get the customers onto the advanced workloads. It's our premium customer success services. That's where we're making money. So you have to think about differently about pricing models for the core offer versus the wrappers that go around them. And really the goal is to try to understand how they link to customer value and have the pricing anchored on that, not based on your cost of production or your cost of services. Yes?
Here you go.
Oh, you're awake.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
So it feels like telemetry is super important
Yeah.
to align to KPIs.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, I would see that automation and digitization plays into this to upgrade to these premium
Yep.
offers. So going back to her question, for these hardware companies that are in this transition
Yeah,
and have limited telemetry,
yeah.
do you see anybody doing this well to align to KPIs? And then the second part of the question is, from an automation perspective, have you seen any companies get to that place?
Yeah.
And if so, any thoughts?
You know, absolutely. And I would say that the R&D development organizations are getting away with murder because they're not coming up with strategies to go back and reconnect to legacy on-prem devices. That's BS, right? It is totally doable. There are companies doing it all the time. You know, the copier business, you know, one of the oldest tech businesses in the world, they used to sell copier. They were never connected to anything. Then all of a sudden they said, my God, we're going to charge by the page. If we can't count pages, we can't bill. Guess what? They figured out how to develop software that they could go back, or little boxes that they could plug in or whatever, and they are getting telemetry data on every one of those copiers. I mean, copiers on oil rigs, copiers on whatever, because they had to. R&D found a way to go back and get telemetry data. So I think, quite honestly, that it's BS that R&D is getting away with not developing strategies because they don't want to go back to the old products. Well, guess what? That data is enabling the differentiating capabilities of that company. So it's been happening for a long time. Companies like Cisco, you know, have learned to go back and connect the legacy products. Absolutely doable and has to happen. Has to happen.
What about the automation? Have you seen any companies automate from telemetry to KPIs to digitization so that, you know, there's trigger events and it can be done in
Well,
an automated
again, I
fashion?
think the example that Chris was given about Rolls-Royce and the jet engines, they weren't connecting to those devices in 1962, right? And then they've gone, and there's slides in this chart about this whole, you know, this whole progression of how you go from a connected product to a set of offers, right? And how those offers drive the outcomes. But if you're not connected, you don't have the data, you're dead. Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you all very much.